What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Bush coming at you solo today to bring you another rookie profile, another tale of the tape series that we started last week. Obviously, the Breece Hall one is still up. If you guys haven't watched that one, go back and watch that one. But today we're talking about Treylon Burks, wide receiver from Arkansas. If you guys are interested in this kind of content, of course, we do have a Patreon for tons of rookie content, databases, rankings, all that good stuff. Dynasty Rankings Manifesto is officially live. So for those of you guys that are looking for quarterback rankings, running back, wide receiver, tight end, for Dynasty, we also have bucketed rankings by age. We have our top 100s for one quarterback and Superflex. Won't have rookie rankings quite integrated yet. We still need to, familiarize ourselves with this draft class. I know a few of y'all have signed up already, so appreciate the support from those of you, but patreon.com/fantasy stock exchange in the description right now. Also, we have consultations available if you guys are interested. $10 for an email, $30 for one of us on a Zoom call, $50 for both of us on a Zoom call. That is available in a Google form in the description as well. But today we are talking about Treylon Burks, his tale of the tape. We're going to talk about how he stacks up in this draft class and in previous draft classes. Like, comment, subscribe if you guys enjoy. Now let's hit the intro. Okay, so the format of this video, I talked about it on the Breece Hall one, but basically we're going to just talk about some background info, measurables, stuff like that at the start. Then we're going to talk about the 6 fundamental traits of the wide receiver position that we scout here at the Fantasy Stock Exchange. If you guys followed me last year, then the 3 easy ones: get open, catch the ball, do something with it after the catch. Easy to identify for anybody, no matter how big your football knowledge is. You guys should be able to identify that if you choose to watch these players yourselves. Then where they win, downfield, short, what's their path to fantasy production? Are they going to be a deep threat? Are they going to be, a target hog, whatever the case is? Then also we talk about how good of an athlete are they? What's their production like? What's their analytics profile and all that good stuff? So that's what we're going to talk about in the meat of the, the video. And then we'll finally close it out with final grades, comparable players, and best fits for them from a scheme, and a team perspective who are looking for wide receivers. So let's start. Treylon Burks, wide receiver from the Arkansas Razorbacks. As you guys can see on the screen, he is age 21.8 as of today, right now. 6'3", 225 pounds is his listed weight. According to Arkansas's website, I've seen him listed as high as 232 pounds, 6'3.5" or so. Obviously, once the combine comes in about a month from now, we'll get official heights and weights on all of these players, and I'll go back and update that in the pinned comment down below. If you're watching this in like April or something, I'll have the official measurements there. So let's get into basic information. Again, high school wise, Treylon Burks was a 4-star recruit, the number 16 wide receiver in the 2019 recruiting class. He went to Arkansas. He chose them actually over Clemson and a number of other big schools. Definitely turned out to be a good decision for him because he was able to produce at a high level at Arkansas, produce like a madman, averaging 91 yards per game in the last 2 seasons and scoring over a touchdown per game, 26 total touchdowns since 2020 as well. So let's start basically with the 6 fundamental traits for wide receivers. On the screen, you will see a prototype. As I talk about each trait, you'll see a prototype for a guy that exemplified these traits best in the past couple draft classes, so you can get an idea who's really good at this and who we're kind of, stacking Treylon Burks against. So we'll start with separation and route running, obviously the prototype being Devontae Smith last year. Of the main on-field traits that we're looking at, this is definitely the one where Burks needs the most refinement, but I don't want to nitpick a big receiver for not being fluid and sudden and twitchy like Devontae Smith because he's physically larger. It's a lot harder for him to actually have those abilities. And when they do have those abilities, when they're a high level, twitchy athlete, that's when you get a Julio Jones type of prospect. And that's not necessarily what we're looking at with Treylon Burks, but route running is a somewhat subjective trait. But what we're looking for when it comes to route running, the easiest way to measure this is how they win, right? And with Treylon Burks, he wins with a combination of great athleticism, physicality, and using his size to leverage defenders. As you guys can see on the screen, you'll see a clip where he's running a one-on-one ISO route against the guy. And obviously, Franks isn't able to get him the ball right away, or whoever the quarterback was at that time. But you can see him win a comeback route and a dig route with good, sudden movement, which is good for a receiver of his size. The best way to measure how good of a route runner somebody actually is their ability to command targets. Because if we were on a playground right now, let's say I'm playing quarterback, whoever is getting open for me is who I'm going to throw the ball to. It works the same way in college football and the NFL as well. So the fact that Burks ranks number 4 in this class with a 31.3% target share His 3.57 yards per route run ranked second in this class, and he had 155.3 quarterback rating when targeted, which is nearly a perfect quarterback rating. 158.3 is a perfect quarterback rating. This is a guy that knows how to get open. He knows how to create separation, whether it's with his ability as an athlete, with his size, or with his physicality. He can do it. So I don't want to hear, Treylon Burks doesn't create a lot of separation, because he does. He does do it in his own way. As a big receiver, they're going to do it differently than a guy like, Cooper Kupp would do it, or a guy like Devontae Smith last year would do it. And once Matt Harmon's reception perceptions numbers come out for the 2022 wide receiver class, I might actually have him on the channel to talk about Treylon Burks specifically. So I'll get to that a little bit later in the offseason. But let's move on to the next trait, and that's hands. So once you get open, catch the ball and do it under heavy contact, whether you're uncovered, whatever the case is, you got to come down with the football to get fantasy points. And we know that drops necessarily aren't a sticky stat when it comes to fantasy production, because some of the best receivers in fantasy do have a lot of drops, but that's normally because they have a lot of targets. And with hands, once you get open, you need to be able to catch the ball if you're covered heavily, especially because that's what leads us to love wide receivers like A.J. Brown, for example, who many have compared to Treylon Burks. And it's because A.J. Brown makes those valuable targets, the red zone targets, the downfield targets count, because he'll moss a defender. He'll, catch it with one hand like he did in the Titans playoff game against the Bengals. That's what makes A.J. Brown special and a wide receiver one for fantasy. So that is what we're looking for when it comes to hands. Treylon Burks has the ability to climb the ladder. He has the ability to play power forward, the type of receiver that he is. He plays a lot like how A.J. Brown plays, with his big frame, come down with a lot of tough catches. And when he doesn't, come down with a tough catch, he's usually been pass interfered with, because he's just that physical, that big. And that's how corners have to play him, because he's just so overwhelmingly big that it's hard for them to defend him. So with Treylon Burks in 2021, he caught 66 of his 81 catchable targets with 4 drops, but he also came down with some absolutely stupid highlight reel catches as well, which is what we want for fantasy. Again, the occasional drop isn't going to ding a guy too much for me, because we've seen a lot of guys produce with, a lot of drops in the NFL, like Deontay Johnson, for example. And overall, his hands are an asset for sure. That's basically the big summarization of his hands. They're an asset to him. They're going to help him in fantasy. So let's get on to his calling card, and that's yards after catch, right? Once you get open, once you catch the ball, what do you do with it? And I am not sure there's a better pound for pound wide receiver in this class that's going to stack even remotely close to Treylon Burks in this category, because the only wide receivers that I've given a perfect grade to in yards after catch the past 3 drafts were Jalen Waddle last year, Jamar Chase last year, and CeeDee Lamb in 2020. So what we're looking at is a guy that has, basically the ability to do it all after the catch. He has the ability to make people miss with elusiveness. He has the ability to break tackles because he's that big and that physical. And he also has the athleticism to just straight up run away from people and find the end zone. We saw it in a number of cases against Alabama that you're going to see on the screen, where he, kind of pushes off a guy, catches the ball, and outruns the entire Alabama defense, which is obviously loaded with NFL talent. That is what Treylon Burks can provide after the catch. He ranks number 1 in this class with 9.3 yards after catch per reception, which is an absolutely absurd number for a couple of reasons. But number 1, because he's 225 plus pounds. That is a stat. Yards after catch per reception typically favors smaller receivers, and 8 of the top 10 guys in this category weighed under 200 pounds. They're the Jamison Williams types. The guys that are smaller are going to be better after the catch. So the fact that Treylon Burks lapped all of them in this category is just absolutely absurd. And you can find that stat along with many others in our Patreon link in the description. But Burks is an alpha-sized wide receiver who ranks the most elite in a metric that favors small receivers, which is just absurd to think about. That is what you're getting with Treylon Burks after the catch. It is clearly his best trait, in my opinion. Number 4, usage and where they win. Like I kind of talked about, we need to be able to identify a path to fantasy production. You guys have heard me talk about this all offseason so far. The path for Treylon Burks is target volume, because that's pretty much what he did in college, right? He had a 31% target share. He was used in the slot, in fact. So he ranked number 6 in this class. 67.7% of his snaps came from the slot, which was very smart by Arkansas, because he was clearly their best player, clearly their best receiver, and they got him in favorable matchups very often and got the ball in his hands very often, which is what they should be doing with a talent who's going to, I believe, go in the first round of the NFL draft. he was still great on the outside. So he can definitely do both, play in the slot and play on the outside as an X wide receiver if a team wants him to do that at the next level. He recorded 3.12 yards per route run versus man coverage, which was 8th in this class, 3.85 yards per route run versus zone coverage, which was 4th in this class. So he is a little bit better when it comes to playing in the slot and playing over the middle, because that's what he did a lot of in college, and he was very good in that role. When it comes to downfield usage, prospects like Jamar Chase, who we saw last year, who's, the dynasty wide receiver 1 or 2, depending on who you ask, can win at all 3 levels of the field. And that is the goal for when we're scouting these players. We want them to be able to do that because that increases their ceiling. And it's the reason I wasn't very high on a guy like Rondale Moore last year, because all he was really doing was stuff that was either behind the line of scrimmage or short, intermediate type of stuff. He wasn't very much utilized downfield. And Treylon Burks was not in that, category whatsoever. He was great downfield, also recording the second highest quarterback rating when targeted on passes over 20 plus yards. So 149.3 QBR when targeted downfield. He could pretty much do it all at all 3 levels of the field. So he definitely checks that box. Number 5, athleticism, as I talked about, touched on it throughout the video basically, but as an athlete, he needs to test well for me to, fully buy into Treylon Burks, but I do think he's going to, because I think he's a great athlete. He looks like he has about 4.4 type of speed. I don't think he's going to be DK Metcalf level of freak athlete, but he's probably going to be just behind that in that Chris Godwin, AJ Brown type of territory as an athlete. Kind of spoiler alert there, but he has good agility. He's going to have a good vertical jump, in my opinion. So his play style and his overall grade are dependent on how he tests, because that's the type of player he is. But I do think he's going to test very well at the combine in March. Number 6, the final trait that we're going to talk about, the final thing that is a factor for wide receivers when we're looking at them, is analytics. Now, if you're a film grinder or you believe that film is more important, I kind of got bad news for you. It is both. They're both equally important. You need to be able to produce, need to be good on paper as well as on the tape. And luckily for Burks, he's about as good as they get on paper as well as on film. And when we look at playerprofiler.com, you guys will see the graphic on the screen right now, but he has the second highest college dominator rating in this class, which is basically just a percentage of his team's receiving production, targets, receptions, touchdowns, yards. In this class, he has the 92nd percentile college dominator. So he checks that box. 31.3% college target share, as I mentioned, 93rd percentile, which is second in this draft class, only to Jaquiri Robinson, who actually trails in both of those categories. The only area that could be a little bit better for Treylon Burks is the breakout age and age-adjusted production. But the problem for Treylon Burks is that he entered college as a 19-year-old. So he was already 19 when he started at Arkansas. He took like a year off after high school or something. I'm really not really sure at this point, but he was 19 as a freshman as compared to Drake London or whatever, who was 18 as a freshman. He only broke out at 20.5, which is 50th percentile. But the reason for this is because he was 19 years old as a freshman. He still broke out in his true sophomore season. And even as a 19-year-old freshman, recorded nearly 500 yards and 9 touchdowns and only 29 catches as a true freshman. So Treylon Burks on paper pretty much checks every box that you could want him to check outside of, being elite in the breakout age category, but he's still good enough that it doesn't, raise any red flags. The subjective traits that we're going to talk about, again, this is, kind of the area that some people will get lost in the weeds about certain prospects, but these need to be weighted less than what we're talking about with the quantifiable traits, because we can look on film and see that a guy is very good after the catch and also cross-reference it to the metrics and to the data. Then we can say definitively they're good after the catch. But with things like toughness, nuance, smarts, polish as a route runner, these are subjective things that are important, but are not, the be all end all of what makes a prospect good or bad, in my opinion, because we can't really measure these quantifiably. So subjective traits is where Treylon Burks does have some concerns. He is raw as a prospect, so his route running needs some development. But early on, whoever drafts him should just put him on the DK Metcalf plan. And what happened with DK Metcalf, and honestly what Mike Evans and Calvin Johnson, some of these other bigger receivers do in the NFL, is they run routes that are very simple. Goes, comebacks, posts, screen routes, crossers, digs, all that stuff that's really easy. They don't run a whole lot of complicated routes like a Calvin Ridley or Stephon Diggs would run. And that's what you have to do with Treylon Burks. And I think he'll, develop that game as he plays in the NFL. Again, we're measuring these guys for what they can be, not necessarily what they are now. And football IQ and awareness and, his football intelligence in general needs some development, but that'll also come with more experience, NFL coaching. I saw a few instances on tape where Burks just wasn't as decisive or urgent as you want him to be, whether it was run blocking or running a route after the catch, whatever the case is. But I saw that with Jamar Chase last year, and that really wasn't a big detractor, of course, with Jamar Chase for fantasy. So it is not a huge concern. Like I said, you weight these things less than the quantifiable things. And then toughness and physicality, again, another subjective thing, but you can clearly see that he has that on film. And I think even he can even get a little bit stronger, similar to what we saw from AJ Brown, because AJ Brown was very strong, very physical in college. And I think once he got to the NFL, he got even stronger. And I think Burks could definitely do that, has the frame to be able to add weight if he wants to. So all those things, not really concerned for me. Final grades. This is what we're kind of, getting down to the brass tacks of things. 975 out of 1,100 is my final grade for Treylon Burks. Puts him about at a mid first rounder, close to a late first rounder, with his best traits, of course, being yards after catch ability, production / analytics, and athleticism. And his weaknesses, like I said, being more, subjective things like he's a little bit raw, needs to develop a better understanding for football, needs to develop a little bit more as a route runner, but all that stuff can be taught. It's all, part of NFL coaching, their job to teach Treylon Burks that. So if he goes to a good situation, I have no qualms saying that this guy could be one of the best receivers in the NFL in a couple years' time. These player cards that you guys can see on the screen are available on Patreon as well. I did over 50 of them for our draft guide last year. We already have Breece Hall's up, Isaiah Spiller's up, and Treylon Burks's will be up as soon as this video is up. So if you guys are interested in those, another benefit of the Patreon for you there. That grade, 975 out of 1,100, just in reference to last year's class and 2020s, just if you guys were curious. Just ahead of Jalen Waddle at 945 is where I had Jalen Waddle last year. Just behind Devontae Smith at 990, Jamar Chase at 1,000. And then in 2020, I had the exact same grade on Justin Jefferson as Treylon Burks has, 975 out of 1,100 as my wide receiver 4 in that class, behind Ruggs, Judy, and Lamb, the big 3 prospects that everybody was enamored with. So that's basically how Treylon Burks stacks up. Like I said, pro comparisons, I've kind of touched on it throughout the entire video, but Chris Godwin, a bigger Chris Godwin, AJ Brown type, is the mold of receiver that we're looking at. I do think Godwin is the better comp than AJ Brown for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think yards after catch ability, definitely both of those guys are very good at it, but how he's used is why I think the Godwin comp makes a little bit more sense, because he was used primarily as a slot receiver at Arkansas. And Chris Godwin, of course, is a big slot receiver in the NFL. And that's what Burks played at Arkansas. So when it comes to best fits, if Chris Godwin moves on from Tampa Bay and he goes to a different team, then I would love to see this guy as a Tampa Bay fan. I would love for them to draft Treylon Burks in the first round to replace Chris Godwin if he signs elsewhere. But he also makes a ton of sense in Detroit. If Dan Campbell wants to use him in like a pseudo Michael Thomas role, that would make a lot of sense to me. And if Byron Leftwich gets a head coaching job in Jacksonville or something, they could definitely use a guy like Treylon Burks to man their, Chris Godwin role if Leftwich is the coach there. I do think he's pretty scheme diverse, though. I think he could fit a number of different schemes. But like I said, because of his yak ability, because of how he was used in college, I do think using him as a big slot, even 30-40% of the time in the NFL, would definitely benefit his overall outlook. Maybe Mike LaFleur in New York wants to use him similar to how we used Brandon Ayuk his rookie season. That would make a lot of sense to me as well. So if you guys did enjoy this video, as always, hit the like button, comment any of your thoughts down below, subscribe to the channel if you are new, check out the Patreon, like I mentioned throughout the video. If you guys want to book a consultation, those are available in the link in the description, Google form there for you to fill out if you're interested in that. Peace out, guys. I'll talk to you soon.